Wolfgang and Wind's Rhapsody, two official sample games made for the new RPGMaker MZ engine. Both of these games were made by rather high-profile figures within the community that I respect, and both of which are endorsed by Dejica to represent their product. I believe that the developers of these games also had access to MZ way before anyone else, fact check later, and along with that had full access to Dejica's bottomless pockets, fact check this too. So, what all's in the pot right now? You've got some incredibly talented people who've been in RPG Maker for a very long time working on the games, you've got access to MZ weeks before anyone else, and you've got Dejica's backing and their official stamp at the ready. Boom, bada bing, it's a beautiful baby shit. That's probably the best way I can describe these games. They are the most beautiful piles of shit I've ever seen, at least within the context of them being sample projects. So, how did these games fail so spectacularly? Subscribe to find out. These games have I think fully, custom artwork all the way through, or at least up until like the hour mark. I got bored as shit and quit playing. Now, bear with me here, because I'm about to launch into a tirade about why I think this custom art is terrible. Before you have a knee-jerk reaction and report me for hate crimes, let me explain. The artwork itself isn't the issue here. The art is gorgeous, or as all the youngins would say, scrumdiddlyumptious. Save for a few barren maps and wonky parallaxes, the art's great, and that's not my issue here. My issue is that this is a sample game. Now, maybe I just don't understand what sample game means. Just kidding, I totally do, and this is not it. My understanding is that a sample game exists to show off the possibilities of X thing. In this case, that thing is RPG Maker MZ. The point of these games, at least if I were to make one, would be to showcase as many features of the new engine as possible in as short amount of time as possible while still having it all flow together with a cohesive story. Now, we'll get into the length issues later on, but for now I want to point out to everyone watching that this art here, this does not exist by default when you buy RPG Maker MZ. This is not the RTP. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think one thing you'd want to show off in these sample games is the versatility of the stock graphics. Dejica, I don't know if you've noticed, but one of the largest issues with RPG Maker is the insane flood of low-effort games onto Steam or other distribution platforms. One of the largest issues these games have is poor mapping. Now, would creating a sample game with good mapping using the RTP solve all of these issues and stop this from happening? No, but it would absolutely make a large dent in the problem. There are going to be tons of people, new and old to RM, who download these games. Showing the possibilities of the RTP will allow them to start their game dev journeys in a much smoother way, because they'd already have inspiration for their maps. They'd have a basis to work from. This right here is one of my largest issues with the sample games. They don't provide a good basis for newbies to build from. Now, you can argue this point a lot in both ways, and I do think aspects of these games do work as sample games, but a massive part of a game is its visual appeal, and you've already destroyed any possibility of people being able to learn from this game by using custom art. A good example would be this opening scene from Wolfgang. Wolfbro gets chucked across a table. What you've done here is shown people that this is a scene that can be made in RM, but at the same exact time you're lying to them by polishing it up with better art than they probably have access to. See this broken table? See this fallen down sprite for Wolfboy? You don't have these with the RTP. So, while yes, you show people that they can make a scene where someone flies across a table, they can't really learn anything from this besides that it's possible. There isn't anything they can emulate except the effects of your animation and the actual process. I don't know, it's tough to explain what I'm trying to say, but hopefully you get my point, and if you don't, I'd be happy to explain more in the comments. I'll leave you with one last parting thought for the art. At least for me, I got the sense that this was sort of subliminal marketing. I'm not sure if the art used here is purchasable as an asset pack, but if it is, it feels like they're sneakily trying to tell people to go buy their art packs. Now, again, I don't mean to start a conspiracy, but it's something that popped into my head while playing and I wanted to put it out there. Anyways, next segment. Real quick before I wail on these games, I want to mention that I think the army recruiting aspect of Wolfgang is pretty neat. The novelty wears off after about the 10th time, but it's still a pretty cool concept. The gameplay in both of these games, especially Wolfgang, is incredibly atrocious. It's not the worst RPG Maker combat I've ever seen, but that's not really a compliment. You don't just spam attack, but there also isn't really any skill to the combat, which is a really poor concept to instill in new users. Both of these games used an active battle system and basically just called that implementing skill into their game, which it's not. In all honesty, I hate active battle systems more than I hate turn-based battle systems. And I really hate turn-based battle systems. The biggest reason is because there's a ton of dead time where you're just sitting and waiting for your bar to fill. I know most of turn-based combat is just sitting and waiting, but at least then your waiting is justified because you get a cool animation and one step closer to not having to do turn-based combat, because honestly I just hate RPG Maker combat in general. This active battle system has a crap ton of dead time, and in Wind's Rhapsody there was a super annoying delay after every animation played for the damage to actually be inflicted. So basically it just felt like both of these games didn't give a single shit about my time. On top of that, both games required a ton of grinding, or at least more grinding than I'm willing to do for a sample game, and both of them had quite a lot of backtracking. Neither of these games felt optimized like the devs really cared about your time. I literally felt like my life was wasting away, and that is not a feeling I should get from a fucking sample game. This review here says 2 hours playtime is good. No, it's fucking not. At most, this should have taken an hour. This is a sample game to demonstrate the capabilities of the new RPG Maker engine and to give devs a reference point for their own games. This is not an entire RPG that I should have to spend any amount of time grinding in. Grinding already sucks. No way in hell am I going to do it in a sample game that doesn't even try to make it halfway interesting. Also, side note, in Wolfsgang, you're supposed to be a super weak wolf, but you can just sort of kill fully armored guards without any backup. I didn't beat the game because it was boring as fuck, so maybe they explain that later on, but the gameplay doesn't even fit with the story in that game, at least from what I saw. Anyways, maybe this is just my undying hatred for turn-based combat coming out. Let's just leave that as it is and move on to something I have a bit more genuine interest in. The story in both of these games is good. Yeah, I had absolutely no issue with Wind's Rhapsody's story. I actually really enjoyed the parts of it that I saw. Wolfsgang actually had a pretty good story too, arguably better than Wind's Rhapsody's. The only issue I have there is that Wolfsgang's story is quite cliché and not something you really want to inspire new devs to write about unless it's done in a rather unique twist, which it isn't really here, but whatever. That's a small little dislike on an otherwise great portion of the game. The stories are the saving grace for both of the sample games. I'm not exactly invested enough in them to want to grind to find the story beats, but the stories are serviceable and work for what they are. So props to you on that one, devs. I also want to mention in this segment that the sound design in both of these games was rather well done. They didn't have footstep sounds, which is a sin and they are going to hell for it, but especially in Wind's Rhapsody, most things made sounds, and realistic sounds at that. It really drew me into the atmosphere of the game and was something I really appreciated being demonstrated in an official sample project. On top of that, I don't know if the music used in these games is in the RTP, but the music is good. So yeah, kinda in the same boat as the art on that one, but still good, and I wanted to point it out. I don't know, like 4 maybe? It's really hard to say, considering I've used MV a ton and MZ's basically just MV, but they still should have shown off something more to show people why MZ is an improvement to MV. I mean, Wind's Rhapsody still had some pretty bad lag. The larger resolution is just kinda yippy, I guess. Some parts are cool, like the UI in Wolfsgang and how it gets updated with every new army member. I didn't know MZ could do that. When I say UI though, don't get it confused with this little on-screen menu button. I absolutely fucking hate this button. It is the worst thing ever invented. And again in Wolfsgang, this area select screen is pretty slick. But I mean, past those two things, yeah, there's not much. These games seem to focus a lot more on the combat system, while at the same exact time not really giving a shit about the combat system. It's really difficult to see why these are sample games. They just feel like games? I mean, if a sample game's job is just to show people that you can make a game in the engine, then cool, they did that. But that's not how I think of sample games. I don't know, it's possible I missed what the definition of sample game actually means, but I feel like a 30-minute to an hour-long game with a good, concise story that shows a lot of different mechanics would be a lot better. We just kinda got two of the same thing with different art and stories that drag on for too long. It would have been cool to see one of the sample games not use the combat system and instead do something like what the old RM horror games did, as a large amount of people getting into RM will probably want to do that. Making this video is difficult, because I really don't want to critique RPG Maker or depict them in a shitty light, but at the same time I think it's kinda important that I do. I mean, I think I'm being fair here, I'm not being unreasonable with the things I say, right? It's not like I'm relentlessly bashing RPG Maker, I want it to be good. I wanted MZ to be good. I'm unsatisfied with what was delivered, and I'm disappointed in the direction the RPG Maker community as a whole seems to be headed. I don't like where things have ended up. You know, back when I was 9 and first discovered RPG Maker, I saw it as some sort of holy messiah that would give me an in on game development. And I mean, it did. I mean, I'm standing here in front of all of you guys. That wouldn't have happened without RPG Maker, right? And MZ's still a good engine. It's not bad, and it's better than MV, really. But I don't know. My unwavering love and affection towards RPG Maker is fading. Maybe it's from having been around in the community for so long, or maybe it's just from seeing the way community leaders have been handling themselves as of late. But I don't like seeing the way that this engine that absolutely changed the course of my life is being treated. Or, maybe I'm just tired of the engine. I'm not saying anything with that statement. I'm not quitting RM, and I'm not quitting making videos on RM. It's just, something that's been in my head for a while, and I felt like I needed to put it out there. Maybe some of you guys feel the same too. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is thank you for 1,000 subscribers. I know a lot of YouTubers do this thing, and I know it's cliche to say that a lot of YouTubers do this thing where I thank you guys for every milestone, but genuinely, I appreciate it. I know this is cliche in and of itself, and as a writer I should be more aware of that, but thank you. You guys have absolutely impacted my life in an incredible way, and no matter what the hell's going on with RPG Maker, the other people in the community, I'll be around. I have many other interests outside of RPG Maker. I actually like playing FPS games quite a lot. Maybe we'll change into one of those gaming channels for, CSGO and Valorant and all that stuff. Maybe. Think about it. Anyways, what I'm just trying to say, I'm not going anywhere. And I appreciate all of you who are, have subscribed and stuck around for so long. Your support really means a lot to me. And, despite my opinions on RPG Maker now, it has impacted me a lot too. So thank you, Dejika, and everyone working on RPG Maker. You've changed my life, and I appreciate you for it. In a good way. Changed my life in a good way. That's an important thing to point out. But yeah, anyways, that's about it. I just had a lot I wanted to say, and I felt like going off script and just kind of speaking my mind into the microphone would help. Apologies for the jump cuts. I'm really bad when seen visually. I'm not very good at expressing this way. I'm better behind the microphone where you can't see me, but I appreciate you guys working with me here. Hopefully, you got something out of this, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.